After a number of messages about the NVIDIA Shield and its ability to be a Plex server, I finally decided to test it out. And, well, to be honest, I wasn't really expecting much. I mean, how much real performance can you get out of a $200 device? Okay, sure, the NVIDIA Shield does technically have 8 cores, and while I don't know the speeds of those cores, I can tell you that 4 of them are the primary beefier cores, while the remaining 4 are smaller supporting cores. But for me, I couldn't escape the thought that it is still a mobile ARM processor that was built specifically for high power efficiency and not for speed. So even though it had 8 cores, it wasn't exactly an i7 or an i5 or something equivalent. This means for me that going in, I was only expecting some basic performance as a full Plex Media Server. In fact, my real thought was, that's a cute gimmick. Well, to cut to the chase, let me tell you this. I quickly found out that my expectations of the NVIDIA Shield was poorly misplaced, and to my surprise, its performance was far greater than I could have ever imagined. But before I get to my results, let's talk for a second about my setup process. Unboxing the NVIDIA Shield was simple and pleasant, and after only having to cut 2 stickers, the box opened up with ease, revealing the Shield immediately. And I have to say that I do love the overall design of the Shield. It's simple and edgy with just enough design to make it stand out. Included in the box is a wall wart with some USB cables for charging and firmware upgrades, along with the NVIDIA Shield game controller. And of course, you get your standard instructions and warranty booklets. But really, who pays attention to that? In addition to my purchase of the Shield, I also decided to get the remote control. For only an additional $50, I love the look and feel of it, but not so much the functionality. I'll cover more on that later in a different video, but for my test, I wanted to have the remote to get the full experience. Hooking up the Shield required the normal things like a power cord, Ethernet, and HDMI cable, but I did want to test out the Wi-Fi usage first, so I skipped the Ethernet in the beginning. And believe it or not, this is actually where I ran into my first frustration. During setup, I wanted to record how everything went, so I was lucky enough to record me typing in my Wi-Fi password and trying to connect to the network, unsuccessfully. Then, after assuming maybe I forgot my password and trying something different, I returned back to the original password and tried it again. This time, I was successful. Now, I'm not entirely sure why this happened, but I did review the video that I recorded and confirmed that both times I typed in the correct password. And I'm not sure if it has something to do with the Shield or my router, but either way, I thought it was worth noting because it's never happened to me before on any of my other devices. In the end, for my server testing, I ran everything off Ethernet anyways. While Wi-Fi can perform fair enough for most cases, I didn't want to risk any kind of bottlenecks that could be avoided easily. My second frustration came from signing into Google. See, it gives you an option to use your phone or computer to sign in with a code. But when I tried to use that code, it told me that the Shield could not be found and it did not work. So I was forced to use the standard sign-in option. I know, it's first world problems like these that can drive a person mad. Anyways, after I signed in and connected to the internet, the Shield had to do its first update, which was right around 900 megabytes and took about, 7 minutes to finish up. After that was finished, I rebooted it and finally I was at the home screen. Now, in case you're wondering why I went through the Shield setup process and didn't jump right to my Plex setup, it's because I want to share my complete experience and outline the full process that you need to do in order to get to your Plex Media Server. Moving on to the actual setup of the server itself, NVIDIA has actually made this really easy. From the home screen, Plex is already installed, so all you have to do is scroll down a bit and click on the icon to start it up. Once you do this, just go to plex.tv/link on your phone or PC and type in your code. And yes, thankfully, this actually worked. After signed in, you'll be walked through a few screens that will allow you to select your setup options. The most important one here being the checkmark box that says Enable Plex Media Server, for obvious reasons. I decided to skip the creation of the default libraries because I wanted to set everything up myself. But of course, that's up to you. I recommend you read the Plex help article on the library setup process to learn more on what is expected. You can check out links to that in the description. Once the setup was done, the interface was pretty basic and required you to visit the Plex web to set up your libraries. I think at this point, I really should explain my configuration choices though. I decided to use my regular Plex server as a file host for the NVIDIA Shield's library. I feel like having a NAS or another PC that's sharing a drive would be common practice for most users. Plus, it was a lot easier for me to set up my testing. It also allowed me to add a pretty decent library of right around 340 movies to see how long that would take. And spoiler alert, it took 42 minutes. Yikes. In relation to the loading of these movies, I should also note that I didn't see any way to move my existing Plex database over to the Shield, but I must admit I really didn't look that far into it because due to the inherited limitations of the Shield as a Plex Media Server, even if I could find a way to use my original Plex database, I technically couldn't use it anyways because it has limited internal storage. You see, right now my Plex data folder is 177 gigabytes, which is absurd, I know, but you can thank Plex's new thumbnail feature for that, as since I have enabled that feature, my data folder has grown tremendously. So, of course, this can't be moved to the basic Shield that I have, being the only 16 gigabyte version. Something you should know though is that if you want to use your network storage to host your media, you must first mount your server to your Shield. That's something I really didn't figure out till I failed a couple times trying to set up my libraries. You can find links to the Plex help article in the description to do this, but really all it takes is going into the Shield storage settings and adding your server. Once you do this, you will now see the server and its available drives to browse while setting up your libraries. Okay, so let's fast forward just a little bit and dive into the performance of the Shield as a full-blown Plex Media Server. And yes, I say fast forward because after adding my folder with 343 movies in it, it took 42 minutes to add them and download all of the information needed to load them. So if you happen to have a large library, you might want to set aside some time to allow this to be completed. For my testing, I made sure to use video files that were all at least 10 megabits per second or higher in quality and encoded in H.264. I did this because I know that the NVIDIA Shield supports hardware accelerated H.264 encoding. So for the best possible performance, this was a requirement. And using higher quality media gave me the worst case scenario when transcoding a large video file to something that a mobile device can handle. As for the results, well, much to my amazement, I was almost able to get 5 fully transcoded streams at the same time, which is surprising, because Plex's own website actually only says that it can handle 2 or 3. Now, of course, every situation is different, so your mileage may vary, but with my configuration and media selection, I ended up with a very capable media server. Now, when I say almost 5, I mean I was able to smoothly play back 4 streams without any issues. It was only on the 5th stream that I started to get some buffering issues. And on each stream, I was transcoding down from a 10 megabit file all the way to 1.5 megabits or even sometimes lower. In fact, 2 of them, I went all the way down to 760 kilobits. So I'm really putting this thing to work here. I mean, if I would have been using direct playback on at least some of these streams, I would have literally ran out of clients to do my testing with. So even with 1 or 2 of those with the direct playback, you could easily run 3 clients in your own household with another 2 or 3 going out to somebody else outside of your home network. You know, assuming you have the bandwidth to handle that kind of thing. So this means on the surface, the NVIDIA Shield is actually a very capable media server with the ability to accommodate a majority of the basic home users. At a price point of only $200 with its sleek design and low power consumption, one could almost say that it's a perfect fit for the everyday Plexer. Almost. With such a small package and an ARM-based CPU, if you're going to consider this as a full-time media server, you should also consider some of its limitations. For starters, in order to get the best performance out of it, you will need to take advantage of the hardware accelerated encoding. And to do that, you will need to make sure that all of your media is compressed in either H.264, 265, or MPEG-2. Now, this is actually easy to do, and most likely a majority, if not all, of your media is already in this format. The next limitation, however, deals with the media optimizer, or more specifically, the storage for the optimized files. You see, if you want to use the optimizer with your media on a network or USB connected drive mounted as a removable storage, the Shield only has read permissions to those drives. This means any optimized versions of the media files will be stored locally on your Shield. And this is okay, but you have to do one of 3 things in order to make it work. 1, purchase a larger 500 gigabyte version of the NVIDIA Shield, which should cost you an extra $100. 2, expand the internal storage of the 16 gigabyte version with something like a large micro SD card. Or 3, expand it by a mounted internal storage USB 3.0 drive. Keep in mind that if you mount a USB drive as an internal storage, you can no longer use it as a regular drive through a PC without reformatting it. Now, these solutions also tie directly into Plex's needs for temporary storage space for transcoding and miscellaneous Plex data. The Plex data includes things like databases, metadata, artwork for your media, and of course, the dreaded video preview thumbnails that can take up a very large amount of space. So while you do have a solution to expand your internal storage with a micro SD card, you are limited to only 128 gigabytes. Of course, you can mount a much larger external hard drive with USB 3.0, but you will in turn lose the ability to use that drive for anything else. Each of these options also add cost that quickly makes the $200 price point fade away. However, if you did want to go down this path, I can say that including with the remote, you can still walk away with only spending just a little over $300. $250 of that, of course, is going to be the cost of the Shield and the remote control. The extra $50 comes from a basic 1 terabyte external USB 3.0 hard drive from Western Digital that I found on Newegg. For $54 at the time of this video, you can more than double the size of the internal storage at almost half the price of the upgrade. The upgrade gives you a 500 gigabyte drive for an additional $100. But let's assume that you have enough storage space to handle your library and all of its features. I still don't recommend that you use the video preview thumbnail feature because of the speed limitations of the Shield. At least not if you're in any kind of a hurry for things to process, because even on a full-blown media server, video preview thumbnails can take a while to generate, especially when adding an entire library at the same time. But hey, if you're willing to wait for it to do its thing, go for it. A couple of the limitations that I find very limiting is the lack of ability to manually install plugins or channels and not being able to specify the server version that you want to run. Not to mention not being able to run add-ons like Plex Watch or Plex Pi, which I happen to use a lot. As far as the Plex server versions go, well, you lose the ability to run preview versions that might include new features that are not yet available to the public, or for that matter, decide to run an earlier version if a new version turns out to be unstable. Now, this doesn't really happen a lot, but I can remember at least 1 or 2 times where I decided to run an older version because of some weird bug that I didn't like in a new release. So it does happen, but it's pretty rare. Okay, time for my conclusion. Much to my surprise, this little $200 machine packs a powerful punch. But to get the performance that you need, you will need to expand the storage, and to take full advantage of the client, you could also use the remote. But for a little bit more than $300, you could get your own media server and a client all wrapped into one. Now that's not bad. Of course, if you wanted to go down this path, I recommend you do a few things. First, make sure wherever you have it that it always has an Ethernet cable connect to it. While Wi-Fi could work just fine, the added latency and chance of a bad connection could cause your overall experience to drop, especially if multiple clients will be accessing it at the same time. Second thing, don't skip out on expanding the storage. I can't stress this enough. USB drives are cheap, and the last thing you want to do is to run into some kind of problems or limitations over something that can be easily avoidable. Just remember, you will need that storage for the Plex database, poster art, metadata, transcoder data, thumbnail previews, and more. Third and finally, prepare your media. Make sure you have everything encoded as H.264 so you can take full advantage of the Shield's hardware encoding. So go through all those old movies and TV shows that you might still have as AVI files and run them through Handbrake. It's free and easy to do, and you can set it to encode an entire folder if needed. And on top of being able to take full advantage of the hardware, you will also be able to get a higher chance of clients being able to directly play video files, meaning that your Shield will have to do much less work to give you the same results. Now just keep in mind though, you might experience some slower speeds while browsing a large database or fast forwarding through a movie or a TV show, and you won't be able to add anything like Plex Watch or Plex Pi. For an investment though of only $250 to $300 to gain not only a capable Plex Media Server but also a client, the NVIDIA Shield really turns out to be a great deal. Well, that's all I have for you today, guys. That's my thoughts on the NVIDIA Shield as a Plex Media Server. If you have any questions, comments, drop a comment down below. Also, if you like this video, show a little bit of love to that like button. It really does me a good favor. And if you want to catch my next video where I take the NVIDIA Shield and put it up against all of the other big clients out there to see how it stacks up, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching and have a good day.